Okay, guys. What a bad start. Okay, so we're going to be tackling the second half of Winter Dreams by F. Scott Fitzgerald, a story that, I had read before, but until this year, not really, didn't really connect with it as much as I have. I love Fitzgerald, and I love all of his writing, his novels, his short stories. I mean, anything the guy did, but this one was really good. So, um, let's talk about. We left off yesterday at the end of section 3 and beginning section 4. There's 6 sections in this. Section 4 is the longest by far. It begins on page 742 in your book. All right, and in this section, we get to see the actual, like, a little bit more about the relationship between Dexter and blank on her name, Judy, as their relationship is developing. We kind of left off in 3 where they were first getting together. Now we're going to see how this develops. And I told the class, and I want to tell you guys too, that really what you're dealing with this girl is, if they could have diagnosed her in the 20s, she is 100% what I would call a bipolar person. Just the way she reacts. We don't really see the depression side of it as much, so maybe bipolar is an unfair statement. We definitely see an issue of manic behavior with this girl, though, as she really doesn't think through her actions. She just acts on them. She's not really concerned about other people, which leads to maybe more of a sociopathic tendencies. But she's definitely got issues, and the problem is that she's seen as sort of like a drug to these men who fall in love with her, because they realize that this is going to be a roller coaster ride. They realize that the lows with this girl are going to be really low, but the highs to them are worth it. I mean, it's just like drugs. Not just like, obviously, but I mean, you see the comparison, right? So, section 4, we begin to see that. We get this image of how much he loves her and how much he's really into her, but we also get these images that she's got other guys that she takes with her. Bottom of 742. He was, as he found before the summer ended, one of a varying dozen who circulated about her. Each of them had at one time been favored above all others. About half of them still basked in the solace of occasional sentimental revivals. Whenever one showed signs of dropping out through long neglect, she granted him a brief honeyed hour which encouraged him to tag along for a year or so longer. Judy made these forays upon the helpless and defeated without malice, indeed half unconscious that there was anything mischievous in what she did. So she's got, at least a dozen guys that kind of are in her orbit. And when one of them feels like he's being neglected and she senses that he's starting to slowly make maybe a different move here to a different type of girl, she reels him back in by making sure she gives him some special treatment until she loops him back in, and he's again obsessed with her. And it indicates that she doesn't do this really intentionally. It's just how she is. Which again leads it to be like there's a mental issue here where she is like this. Okay, of course it's the guy's fault too, because they continuously put up with it and keep going in. You get this image of, I think it was in this one or the yeah, it's this image of, these first 3 days they're together. We've moved up to the top of 743 here. Sorry, I don't have this part highlighted. It's highlighted in my book at home. So top of 743, we got these 3 roller coaster days of just way up here. It's not even a roller coaster. It's just way up in the mountains. Everything's perfect. They're having this like torrid love affair. Everything's terrific. And then all of a sudden, she has someone come visit from out of town, and she's got a new guy staying at her house for the next few weeks. And, Dexter's kind of forgotten for the most part. And then, eventually it sounds like she gets engaged to this guy, but then she decides she doesn't like him and she kicks him to the curb, runs off with another guy. I mean, this is continually the habits with this girl. And one of the really cool lines I got here is, on that note, the summer ended. Dexter was 24, and he found himself increasingly in a position to do as he wished. So the fact that the summer ends, and seasons are a big deal in a lot of Fitzgerald's work, but he really likes to, it's really heavy in this. The title's Winter Dreams. I mean, come on. But the summer ending and him being 24, that's not unintentional that those two are jammed together. You get the image here of his youth and being a kid and doing stupid stuff. It's that time is done. So now he's supposed to be, moving on and doing better. But we're going to see that this, you would think that when you grow up and you realize, hey, this girl's no good for me, it's causing me untold amounts of stress. And while I'm happy at times, I'm also extremely depressed at times. I need to get away from her. All right. So then we get to the beginning on 744, still in section 4, by the way. We learn that when he, and this is again told out of chronological order, so apologies for that. But we get that 18 months after he met Judy Jones, after Dexter meets her, he's engaged to another girl, a girl named Irene Shearer. And this girl is not Judy in any way, shape, or form. She's actually a really good, kind, caring person. Excuse me. When she meets Dexter and she gets engaged to him, she has some other suitors who are also interested in her. She immediately dismisses them. She's a one man woman, and so she dedicates herself to him. We get the image that she's cute but not pretty by any stretch. Not the kind of girl that you'd be willing to put up with what Dexter and every other girl who gets involved, every other guy who gets involved with Judy would deal with. But she's obviously better for him. She has a good family that likes Dexter. It's the kind of girl he should be with, to be honest, and to be honest with you. But he just doesn't seem interested. He's still in the back of his mind thinking about this other girl. It doesn't matter. You always are chasing that first. If you put in the drugs, since you're chasing that first high, but you're chasing that loved one, that girl you love, that one that got away type situation. Except this is that times 100. um, so he finally comes to the agreement that, hey, look, this just isn't going to happen. Now, this is before he meets Irene, okay? So this is where it gets a little out of control. So before he meets Irene, he finally comes to the realization, hey, this Judy thing's not going to happen. He slowly weans himself off of her. He convinces himself that it's not going to work. He tries to distance himself so he's not tempted to go back to her. And then finally, at some point, he's at a party and he sees himself sitting there talking to Irene, and he realizes, hey, she'll do, I guess. Now, the problem is that he set his standards so high because of this other girl, coming back down to just what the kind of girl he should be with is going to be a little difficult for him. All right. And, that's the issue here. So anyway, they become engaged. And let's see, where's a good paragraph here? No, it's not that one. Let's keep going. All right. So he goes eventually one night. He's engaged to her. They're about to announce their engagement and move to the next step, but the period where they're going to be engaged before they actually get married. And Dexter goes to see Judy, not Judy. Goodness gracious, he goes to see Irene, and she's having a headache. So he goes back to his apartment at one of the clubs he's a member of, and just so happens Judy comes by to visit. Now, she's been out of town. She's been in Florida. So, the distance has helped him to kind of put her away. But when he sees her again, everything comes rushing back. And she quickly picks up right where she left off. She convinces him to go off with her, and she pulls out all of the tricks, okay? This is on 746 to 747. You get, she says, have you missed me? She asks suddenly. Everybody missed you. Now, this is when they're in their car riding off together, which she should have said no to begin with. He wondered if she knew of Irene Shearer. She had been back only a day. Her absence had been almost contemporaneous with his engagement. So it's like, I wonder if she knows that I'm engaged. Well, come on, guys. We know she knows that. There's no way she doesn't. That's why she's showing him attention. Remember, this is her MO. She finds guys that she's losing contact or she's losing her hold on, and she reels them back in. And that's what's going on. What a remark, Judy laughed sadly, without sadness. And we're top of 747. Looked at him searchingly. He became absorbed in the dashboard. You're handsomer than you used to be, she said thoughtfully. Dexter, you have the most memorable eyes. He could have laughed at this, but he did not laugh. It was the sort of thing that was said to sophomores. Yet it stabbed at him. I'm awfully tired of everything, darling. She called everyone darling, endowing that endearment with careless individual camaraderie. I wish you'd marry me. The directness of this confused him. He could have told her now that he was going to marry another girl, but he couldn't tell her. He could as easily have sworn he had never loved her. I think we'd get along, she continued on the same note, unless probably you've forgotten me and fallen in love with another girl. Now, of course, she knows, okay, and this is her way. These men are all hers, and she doesn't want to let them go. So she keeps reaching out to him, and finally she admits that she knows about this girl. And when it seems like he's gonna, not be interested, the top of 748. When he makes a comment, she says, "I wish we could be like that again." And she said, forcing himself to answer. I don't think we can. I suppose not. I hear you're giving Irene Shearer a violent rush. There was not the faintest emphasis on the name, yet Dexter was suddenly ashamed. So now he feels, that like he's settling and she's calling him out for it. She even cries and talks about how she can't understand why she's so beautiful and can't be happy and how much she really wants to be with him. And of course, this is exactly what he wants to hear. He's got that winter dream of this girl that now she's grown up. She even makes a comment about, don't take me back to the party. I don't want to be around those children. So it's this image that he's matured. So has she. Now he can finally have her and not deal with the ups and downs because of all the other guys. It'll just be the two of them. And he thinks about it and he makes the wrong choice and decides, okay, let's give this a shot. And he breaks it off with Irene, the girl who he could have been, and this is the thing. It's a key line. It's was it we just saw? I think it was back on page 745. I think it was the one I was looking for earlier. Yeah, it's on 745. Right in the middle, he says that old penny's worth of happiness he had spent for the bushel of content. And so that's the issue. He had this opportunity to be content with this girl. Content doesn't always mean happy, but it means you're comfortable. And it's not a bad thing. Contentment is good. But he wanted that like rush, that elation, that up here, that mountaintop feeling that could only be captured by this girl. And he's willing to deal with the valleys is what he comes to agree with. So he gives up his shot at contentment for this gamble on happiness. And that brings us to section 5 on page 749. Very short section, but basically what this section gives us is that within a month, Judy has moved on and found her another man, and even used the great excuse of, well, I really feel bad about taking you away from Irene, which of course is that ship has sailed. There's no way he can get her back at this point. No girl's going to be like, oh yeah, I'll take you back now. So he's given up what could have been a good thing in his life for the option of perhaps it being something great, but more than likely not going to be. And so we also get in section 5. It's really easy to gloss over what has happened to this man at this point. Dexter is he's become numbed to anything. An example I used in class was, if you've had a job where you've been doing something at the top level, if I've been teaching, if I've been a professor, I was teaching English at Princeton University, and I had a classroom full of kids who were, going to be brilliant writers one day. And then all of a sudden I lose that job, or I give it up, and I go back and I decide to teach 7th grade reading at a public school in the middle of Detroit, or Chicago, or pick a big city. I don't care. But teaching middle school English, that is such a drop from what you were. And what might have seemed like a good job if you had never had the other job now feels like such a chore. And that's where he's become. He's numb to everything. He doesn't even seem to really care what he's done to Irene and her family, how it's set back his own career and his own happiness. He's just kind of, it's not that he's like, I just don't care, like, it doesn't matter to me, forget those people. It's more like he's just numb to the feeling, which is what this girl has done to him. She has done so much damage to his life. It brings us into chapter 6, or section 6, where we get the years later, the resolution type thing, where we find out that Judy's actually gotten married to a guy who's doing the same thing to her now. Look on page 750. He says, this guy named Devlin is we don't see Judy again. We just get her through the words of this guy, Devlin, who, he says, awfully nice girl, brooded Devlin meaninglessly. I'm sort of sorry for her. Why? Something in Dexter was alert, receptive at once. Oh, Lud Sims has gone to pieces in a way. I don't mean that he ill uses her, but he drinks and runs around. Well, doesn't she run around? No, she stays at home with the kids. Oh, she's a little too old for him, said Devlin. Too old, cried Dexter. Why, man, she's only 27. And they keep discussing the fact that she looks older than she is because she's not as beautiful as she was. In fact, Devlin indicates that she's all right, which is not really a very complimentary term, and that now she's just not as pretty as she once was. And like, this really hits Dexter hard. He's like, wait, this girl who, he still has a good life, but, his shot at, having a better life, he gave up for the gamble on this girl, and now she's just a nobody. It's really hard for him. And then you're going to see some very Gatsby-esque language here at the end. We get a sort of dullness, and I'm on 751. I'm going to read the rest of this to you, okay? There's a sort of dullness settled down upon Dexter. For the first time in his life, he felt like getting very drunk. He knew that he was laughing loudly at something Devlin had said, laughing at something Devlin had said, but he did not know what it was or why it was funny. When in a few minutes Devlin went, he lay down on his lounge and looked out the window at the New York skyline into which the sun was sinking in dull, lovely shades of pink and gold. Remember, those two colors have been associated with Judy throughout the throughout the story. He had thought that having nothing else to lose, he was invulnerable at last, but he knew that he had just had something, that he had just lost something more, as surely as if he had married Judy Jones and seen her fade away before his eyes. So he thought he was untouchable now, that she had done all the pain and damage she possibly could, and he is now numb to it and nothing impacts him. But now he feels like he's lost something else, and it's this ideal that he had. And look at this next sentence, man. The dream was gone. That's so Gatsby. Something had been taken from him. In a sort of panic, he pushed the palms of his hands into his eyes and tried to bring up a picture of the waters lapping on Sherry Island and the moonlit veranda, and Gingham on the golf links, and the dry sun and the gold color of her neck soft down, and her mouth damp to his kisses, and her eyes plaintive with melancholy, and her freshness like new fine linen in the morning. Why, these things were no longer in the world. They had existed, and they existed no longer. So that's that ideal that this pedestal he'd placed this girl on, and that he had risked everything for, and he lost it, but it's still, there was just that dream in the back of his head, like, I had this girl for a brief amount of time, and if only some things were different, I could have had her. But now even that's snatched away. Now the idea is, if he had gotten her, look what would have happened. Since for the first time in years the tears were streaming down his face, but they were for himself now. He did not care about mouth and eyes and moving hands. He wanted to care, and he could not care, for he had gone away and he could never go back any more. The gates were closed, the sun was gone down, and there was no beauty but the gray beauty of the steel that withstands all time. Even the grief he could have borne, goodness, sorry guys, even the grief he could have borne was left behind in a country of illusion, of youth, of the richness of life where his winter dreams had flourished. So it's like, there's no feeling left for this guy. Anything he could have had has been taken from him back when he made these winter dreams about, what these things he wanted that were not going to be good for him and eventually were going to cost him. Long ago, he said, long ago there was something in me, but now that thing is gone. Now that thing is gone. That thing is gone. I cannot cry. I cannot care. That thing will come back no more. And again, this passion, this excitement about life he's had taken from him, because, again, he tried to live way too high for himself, and it ends up costing him. Okay, so this beautiful story, not a happy ending, but that's not Fitzgerald's bag. Remember that. But really a beautiful story about, what happens when we put, so much hope and so much, into a relationship that has so many red flags that we really know we need to get out of. If he had seen this back at the beginning and not invested so much of his time and his life and his thoughts and his blood and his sweat and his tears into this relationship, then he'd probably have been just fine. But that's the risk you take with, the big swings, and that's what he did. I guess there's nobility in that, but he should have seen and gotten out of this. So this parallels, I think, in a lot of ways, if you were to study some of Fitzgerald's history, the situation with him and his wife, who his wife Zelda had a lot of issues. Again, we were in the 20s, 30s, that time period where, mental health was not really treated the way it should. It still isn't today, by the way, but definitely back then, people were not dealt with the way they were supposed to. So Fitzgerald felt himself in this situation. I think there's a lot of autobiographical elements in that story where he felt this way, and he knew what it was like to have a really torrid relationship that had these amazing moments, but also these very tragic ones as well, as his wife was, in and out of asylums, and he spent a lot of his money from his writing to try to take care of her. And you really get the sense that he really loved her. Just like Dexter, for whatever reason, really loved Judy, even though she definitely doesn't deserve it. Now, I'm not saying that Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda, didn't deserve it, but Judy definitely in this story doesn't. So remember, our deal here is to look at the way the characters were presented and look at how, Dexter and Judy, and when we say they're round characters, we talk about their varying traits, but also what I want you to think about is how realistic they are. Because, when I was teaching this in class, kids were like, oh, I know a person that, does that exact same thing that's just like that. I mean, we can see these people. That is a good character, a character that's realistic. You don't need a character that's very, there's no way there's a real person like this. These are terrific. Fitzgerald's great with his characters. He was great in The Great Gatsby. He's great in this. And I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I really enjoyed teaching it. I think it's an awesome example of one of my favorite writers, peak of his craft. I think it's a terrific story. A lot of my students who've gone to college have studied this and really liked it too. So, hopefully, it gave you a little bit more. I know a lot of you didn't read The Great Gatsby like you were supposed to. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of dose of Fitzgerald. So again, if you are learning from home and you weren't in class, you've got to do the reading on your own. I kind of hit the high points, but that's not all there is to it. And if you're just trying to follow that, you're going to get lost. You need to do the reading, watch the video. That's the pattern. Okay. I know it's a lot of reading, but it's really not that bad, okay? So anyway, guys, thank you for that. We're going to be moving into some Steinbeck next. Initially, I was going to give you guys a novel by Steinbeck. Honors class was going to do The Grapes of Wrath, and regular class was going to do Of Mice and Men. I've decided to kind of put that on the back burner right now. Of Mice and Men, I need to think about a little bit differently. I know there's a lot of stuff in there that it's totally fitting for the novel, but for you guys, some of you may not get what I'm trying to do. So I have to rethink that. And Grapes of Wrath is quite a large book. You should be able to read it, but I need to go through it myself and again make sure. I love Steinbeck. Now, he's no Fitzgerald, but we're going to get into some of that. And we're going to move into some really, we're getting out of the Roaring Twenties. We're getting into this Great Depression era writing, and got a lot. If you look at your agenda, there's a lot with this. So we're going to start making use of a lot more video, not just these videos, but in class some videos to let you see some context, because I think that's important. And because, I want you guys to get enough. Those of you at home need to get something out of this class besides you're just doing questions and watching a 20-minute video, which is not the goal. All right. Okay, guys. Well, that's a good stopping spot. So I will see you back here tomorrow when we cover Steinbeck. And I believe there's something else we're going to throw in there with Steinbeck, but we'll get to that tomorrow. So anyway, have a great evening.